Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this professional learning opportunity. Pueri Cantores presents We Sing webinar series part 3, How We Sing. I am Bailey Cornelius, Digital Project Coordinator at NCEA, and I will be facilitating the webinar today. A few housekeeping notes as people are joining. We are recording the session today. If you have questions during the presentation, feel free to use the Q&A window. We will monitor any questions and try to answer them in the allotted time. At the end of the session, I will share a link to the online survey in the chat and instructions on how to receive a certificate of completion for the webinar. Today's presenters are Carling FitzSimmons and Dr. Rudy Marcozzi. Carling FitzSimmons is a conductor, singer, and arts educator. She is also the artistic director of the Spirito singers, treble choirs from 5th through 12th grades, and has worked with the Pro Musica Youth Chorus, Chicago Public Schools, and Merit School of Music. She is also the founder and artistic director of La Caccina, a professional ensemble that champions and performs diverse, innovative repertoire for women's voices. Dr. Rudy Marcozzi is an award-winning educator, dean and professor emeritus at Roosevelt University Chicago College of Performing Arts. He is also an active professional church musician with extensive parish and university experience at local, regional, and diocesan levels. He is a member of the National Association of Pastoral Musicians, the Hymn Society in the United States and Canada, the North American Academy of Liturgy, and a board member of the American Federation of Pueri Cantores. He was a regular reviews contributor to Pastoral Music and editor, and contributing author for Preparing Your Catholic Wedding. He currently serves as the coordinator of music ministry at the Sheil Catholic Center at Northwestern University. Before I turn it over to our presenters, let us begin in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Father, thank you for all these men and women who have given their talents to educating our young people. Through the challenges they encounter each day, lead them to an ever deeper appreciation of the sacred duty to which you have called them. May they be people of integrity so that they can be witnesses as well as teachers. We pray that the schools they lead will become places where our young people can experience your love in their lives. Thank you for our Catholic schools. Help us to pray without ceasing, to work without wavering, and to give without grudging, in order to ensure the future of Catholic education for all of our children. We make this prayer through your Son, Jesus Christ, our teacher and our Lord. Amen. And now I will hand it over to Carling FitzSimmons.
Thank you so much, Bailey. Hi, everyone. I can't actually see any of you, which is a little bit strange as a teacher. It brings me back to the dark days of COVID, but I trust that you're all well. Thank you so much for joining me today. The topic of my presentation is how we sing, and we're going to be going over some rehearsal techniques for singers from the very most beginning levels of choir and communal singing all the way up through your advanced ensembles, your high school students and beyond, in a way that promotes healthy singing regardless of what style we're working in, and also hopefully encourages musicianship and good musical training throughout their curriculum. So let's get started. To tell you a little bit more about myself, I am the very grateful product of a lot of great music educators. I would not be doing what I'm doing today if it weren't for my fabulous teachers. I've always loved to sing. I participated in the school choir at my parochial school, starting in 2nd grade, and then loved it so much that I wanted more, and so joined a community youth choir. When I went to college, I assumed that I would not be a music major and just participate in the music sort of offerings that my college had. I went to Kenyon College, which is a small liberal arts school in Ohio. But music just sort of grabbed me and pulled me in a way that I couldn't deny. And so I ended up double majoring in music and in English, the music being my joy major and the English being the well, at least I'll know how to write so I can have a job that pays me something after I graduate. And at school, while I was there, I was trained as a classical singer. I'm really not a pop vocalist. I don't have a lot of belt chops. And so the a cappella scene at my school wasn't really accommodating for classical singers. And so I founded a classical women's a cappella ensemble at Kenyon that it still exists today. And the reason I was able to do so many cool things with music throughout my childhood is because I had really great teachers who saw my potential and trusted me with leadership positions. And that sense of trust is going to kind of be the glue that holds all of our conversation together today. Trust flowing both from you, an educator, to your students, but then also amongst themselves and then back to you. And trust being really the foundation upon which we build all of our creativity, all of our risk taking, all of the beauty that we are able to share with others through our gifts. So that was sort of at school. And then I graduated from college. And just as I was graduating, a position to conduct the middle school and elementary school choirs at my community chorus that I grew up singing in, which is the Pro Musica Youth Chorus, opened up. And I was like, well, let me throw my hat in the ring and see how it goes. And I did, and I got the position. So that was very much like being thrown to sharks and being like, okay, now learn how to swim. I was totally unprepared for what it would be like to actually be a teacher in front of a classroom. I had to learn gesture sort of on the fly because I had only audited a conducting class at college. There was a lot of learning on the job, and I imagine that's true for some of you as well. So we're in it together. We're going to get through it. And I was able, because of my colleagues, because of my wonderful students, to take my experiences and learn from them and move forward. I also founded the sort of grown-up version of the group that I founded at Kenyon called La Caccina. We're still performing. We actually have concerts this weekend. It's very exciting. And then from there, I sort of built on my experiences both as a singer and as an educator, and got positions at the Merit School of Music, which is a social justice-minded community music school based in the heart of Chicago. And then in the pandemic, since the pandemic, I have taken over as artistic director of Spirito Singers. At Spirito, I have a middle school ensemble, a high school girls ensemble, and then an a cappella ensemble as well. So lots of different iterations of communal singing, lots of different age groups and levels of experience and levels of comfort. And I think one of the things that I found actually since the pandemic, and I wonder if this is true for you all as well, is that kids are kind of different now post-pandemic. We had a sort of a cessation of like social growth. And I'm seeing that play out in my choral classrooms a lot, just in terms of trust and collaboration and anxiety and some of those things popping up in my students. And so building up that confidence and that trust again is a huge part of why I do what I do. And also we'll talk about how to do that in many, many different ways. So we're not able to use the chat, so I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of brainstorming just on your own right now. We'll take a little minute, and I would like for you to think about a good choral rehearsal, whatever that means to you, whether you were a participant in a good choral rehearsal, maybe you sing in choirs now, or you sang as a child, or you are running good choral rehearsals now and you're like, I'm killing this is all good. What does a good choral rehearsal look like? What does a good choral rehearsal sound like? And what does a good choral rehearsal feel like? And if I could ask you to just jot down some of your thoughts on these matters. What does it look like when you know that your choral rehearsal is really cooking, right? It feels good. You look out at the students, you know that they're engaged. What does that actually look like? What does it sound like when your rehearsal is going well? Is it because of the harmonies that are being achieved? Is it because of the laughter of the kids? Is it because it's super, super quiet? What does that mean for you? And then what does it feel like when you leave the room and you sort of reflect back on the experience of running that rehearsal? What does that feel like to you? And we're going to sort of break down each of these things one at a time. And we'll starting with what does a good choral rehearsal look like? So for me, a good choral rehearsal looks like a balance between structure and flow. Let's talk about structure first. So structure is implemented in a number of different ways for me. Structure looks like, first thing is I have a warm-up routine that I use every single time I am in charge of a choir. It doesn't matter whether it's my choir, my singers who are used to me, or a brand new choir, I'm guest conducting, I'm subbing, anything like that. I have a routine that I use to warm my singers up. And it's the same order of operations every time. I use different vocal exercises depending, right, on the repertoire for the day. So let's say the repertoire I have features some difficult staccato passage, and I want to prepare my singers for that. I'll bring in a warm-up that features a staccato passage. But before that, the order of operations is going to be the same. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. And the reason I have it the same every single time is sort of why, the same way that somebody might begin each day with prayer, just personally for themselves, or why yoga has sun salutations that always go through a series of prescribed movements in the exact same order, in the exact same way. It's just sort of a ritual to prepare your body for what's about to happen, and also your mind. So my singers know that when we stretch up, that means it's time to start the rehearsal, and they understand the expectations and the rigor that come from that practice, so that they can sort of get their thoughts aligned for what we're about to do. The second thing that structure means for me is that I have a sort of a master plan for how I pace my rehearsals. And I can't claim credit for this. I did not come up with this. I stole this from a smart educator, but it's really worked for me. And so I'm going to share it with all of you so that you likewise can just steal it. The first thing is opening activities. So that's your warm up, that's your, circle song, that's your round, whatever you're doing to sort of call everyone in to the rehearsal. Then after that, we go to the section of the rehearsal that I call finesse. So that's something that we've worked on before that is familiar to the singers, that's going to hook them right away, and they're going to jump right in and be able to just go straight into sort of building on skills that they have already learned. So something familiar, they don't have to maybe turn their brain on too much. We're still sort of just warming up and getting ready to sing. The after finesse, once we're done with that, and that's maybe 10-ish minutes of rehearsal time. My rehearsals range from an hour and 15 minutes to 2 hours long. So scale it for however's appropriate for you. After our finesse section, we go to the break new ground section. And this is where the first time that I ask them to do something that's going to require a little bit more focus, but hopefully with the opening activities, with the finesse, they're ready to do that at this point. And that's break new ground. So it's a new piece that I'm asking them to sight read. It's a new section of a work that they already know. The finesse could be, we go back, we polish what we learned last week, and now we're going to learn the new section. It doesn't need to be a new piece, but it's going to be something that's going to ask them to use their brains in a new, like, create new material sort of way. After we do that, that's a pretty big chunk of the rehearsal. Like maybe I would spend 20 minutes on that. Then we do something quickly to switch it up. We sing around, we do a rhythm exercise, we do a poison pattern sort of thing where you clap some rhythms, and if you clap the one that's on the board and they clap it back, then they're out or whatever. This is where you sort of play your games or just give them a brain break. Then we go from there 5 minutes at the most to dig deep. This is where I ask them to do the biggest lift of the rehearsal, sort of 3/4 of the way through the time. I'm going to ask them to do something that's very challenging, whether it's we're going to really get nitty gritty about an ensemble issue in a particular piece, or we're going to do this really hard sight reading on a new piece, or whatever it is that's going to be the biggest lift of the rehearsal. I put it in this dig deep section. And then finally, we conclude. The goal is for your singers to walk out of your rehearsal singing. They need to walk out singing, walk out like happy and ready to go out into the rest of their day, so that they're excited to come back the next time. And so this will be, I'll put the most fun piece, or the piece that they like the most, at the end of the rehearsal, or we'll just do something that feels joyful and good and lets them just sort of like let loose for that last little bit of rehearsal. So that's the pacing that I sort of follow every single time I have a rehearsal, and I can really tell when I've broken from that pacing that things don't work quite as well for my singers as I would hope them to. And then the final piece of structure is something that you can do collaboratively with your ensemble or solo by yourself. That is goal setting. So at the beginning of every rehearsal, I sort of lay out for my singers, okay, these are the goals. This is what we're hoping to do at this rehearsal. We want to get through measures 1 through 10 of this piece. Then we're going to work on memorization on this piece. Then we're going to do some sight reading. Then we're going to play a game. Then we're going to, whatever it is. And whether that's like, oh, okay, guys, you can choose at the end here whether we want to do this piece, or whether we want to work on sight reading or ensemble work, whatever that is, to include your singers in the goal setting so that it can be a communal activity rather than a top down, like, I am the font of all knowledge and you must all listen to me at all times. It helps to share the responsibility of the music making with your singers, because at the end of the day, we as conductors are not actually singing. We can only tell them when to start and stop with our hands and like how to shape phrases, but at the end of the day, they're the ones making the music. So having them be part of all parts of the creative process really helps to share that trust and show that you trust them, and therefore that they can trust you as well. I've just found that having a consistent, reliable rehearsal structure means that singers know what to expect, and so they can trust the process, and therefore trust that if we deviate from that process, which we're going to talk about in a second, that it will be for the greater good and not just like, I've gone off the rails. So yeah, let's, if you'll humor me, I would love to show you my warm-up routine, and you're welcome to do this with me. We're not going to sing. My piano is very out of tune. I'm not going to subject you to that, but we can sort of go through how I do my warm-ups. So the very first thing that happens is we stand and we stretch up. So I invite you to join me if you feel so inclined. It can be good after sitting or working all day to just like get the kinks out. So we stand and we stretch up. We reach as high as we can. We reach over toward one side. We reach the other way, we reach to the top, and then we let our wrists get heavy and our elbows get heavy and our shoulders get heavy and our forehead gets heavy, and then we pull over until we're bent over at the waist as far down as each singer individually can go. So we hang there for a little bit, we look up, we look down, we sway from side to side like an elephant lumbering through the forest who doesn't bop its neighbors. We stop. We take a deep breath, and I encourage them to feel expansion, and I will encourage all of you as well to feel expansion around the back of your body as you breathe in, and then let it out on just a nice sigh. Ah, excellent. Then we roll up on a count of 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Shoulders back. At this point, I usually have a lot of singers who are like fussing with their hair, so I like to say, fix your hair. Roll your shoulders forward. Create some tension and relax. Tension, relax, tension, and relax. Lift one arm, tilt your head over toward that side, gentle pressure on the opposite ear. If your singers are feeling very stretchy, they can reach out their arm to create a long line all the way from their neck all the way down to their fingertips. If they want to just leave their hand to their side, that's fine. And we'll roll around to the other side and stretch the opposite way. And the reason we focus so much on stretching and breathing right away is because our bodies are our instruments, right? And so we need them to be awake, loose, alert, ready to do the work that we're asking. Next thing I have them do is to make the biggest possible face. And I find that this is particularly effective with young singers, because when we speak, go about our regular day, we only open our mouth about this much. But when we sing, especially if we're singing classical music, Western classical music, or the bel canto tradition, we're going to want a much taller vowel, right, than you would use just speaking in your everyday life. So I have them make the biggest possible face, and I call this a lion face, like your whole face is roaring. And then I have them make a lemon face, like your whole face sucked on a lemon. Lion face, lemon face, and we do this like, I don't know, 5 times or so. Then I have them give themselves a little jaw massage. And this works best if you let your jaw hang loose, like you're bored, which usually gets a giggle, because some of them, well, all of them know what being bored feels like, but some of them may feel bored right then. And then we clasp in the front, let your jaw hang loose, and shake your hands like this, and the goal is to let your jaw be so loose that it sort of jiggles around and it helps to make a noise, and this also gets a laugh. It's just fun, but also effective. Then we start our hissing. So this is when we practice some choral skills like watching your conductor, breathing together, stagger breathing. You can cue a hiss all together and hold, and then you can talk about stagger breathing. You can cue short staccato hisses and encourage them to feel that connection to their abs. You can use one hand for your sopranos and one hand for your altos and cue different things. And it's all in the service of getting them hooked in right away, giving them something easy that they can do no matter how much singing experience or how little they have already. But also that's like building actual choral skills that they're going to use later on in that very rehearsal. And then you're building these skills forever. And this picture that you see on your screen that's not me, surprise. This is actually one of my middle school students. I lost my voice this past fall and couldn't teach for a couple of days. I could tell, like, do charades, but I couldn't sing, and so I couldn't demonstrate. And so I asked one of my 8th graders to lead warm-ups for her peers in the middle school ensemble. And she was able to do this so successfully because the routine is the same every time. They know what to expect. She knew how to do everything, and she has a good gesture. I was so proud of her. She's, just observing and focused. So this is also a great opportunity for you to give your singers some leadership after a while of setting up the routine, whatever yours is. Let somebody else take the podium and see how they do. You'll never know. They probably will surprise you. So that's the warm-ups that we do before we start singing. We always end with hissing, that's breath control, and then we go into whatever vocalizations that we're going to do for that day. I usually do 1 little steps up, 1 down, and then big leaps up. And that one is usually fun, something like My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean, or I Love to Sing, with some physicality as well. So now let's talk about flow. Flow looks like, okay, you've got your structure, you've got your plan, and you're ready to deviate from it as soon as you feel that your singers are not with you. So you can do that in a number of ways. As I just mentioned, you can put a student on the podium to shake it up. This is one of my high schoolers conducting the middle school ensemble this past spring at our concert, or at a rehearsal before our concert. You can do some experimentation, have them sit in their sections and go through and solfege a portion of the piece that they're working on, or have them find all of the dynamics and circle them and then go through as a group and map them all out. And then I always like to have some back pocket activities if it's just a really rough day. I'm sure you all know about these, like they've had testing all day and they're exhausted, or whatever it is that's dragging them down. Have something that's like going to build community, but not necessarily be musical. So this is my high school group doing a human knot, which they always groan about, and then they have a dang great time doing it. They just giggle their heads off the whole time. So having those back pocket activities that are just I can do this in 5 minutes, it'll break up the monotony, and it'll sort of shake people out of their doldrums, are really, really important. And it feels hard sometimes to take time to do that as an educator, to do a back pocket activity when it's not working on the repertoire. We've got, mass this weekend that we're not ready for. We've got a competition coming up or a festival. It truly, truly is worth it to have your singers build bonds and trust with each other. So I encourage you to do one of these back pocket activities at least every month or so, to get in the habit of having choir not just be about community singing, but also be about all of the things that make community so great. So now let's move on and talk about what a good choral rehearsal sounds like. And for me, it sounds like healthy tone in any style. No matter what repertoire you're singing, no matter what genre, culture, whatever that you're borrowing from to make your performance authentic, there are a couple of things that all singing has in common. The first is excellent breath support. So in your warm-up, build in breath support exercises. The second one is that our bodies are our instruments, so our bodies are participating in the music, whether that means standing with great posture, standing up, keeping an open chest. I had a teacher referred to this as a smiling torso. So whatever floats your boat, but an open chest, open along the collarbones, or whether that's you're singing a gospel piece and you're moving. You know, your bodies are instruments and they are participating in the music. And then the final thing is expressive singing. We as singers have a superpower, and that is that we get words. No other musician gets words. We can tell stories. And so it's super important that as singers, our faces are just as much part of our music making as our voices are, as anything else is. So encourage your singers to find that story in your piece and then be expressive about the text. Now, the any style is where it gets a little tricky, because if you're classically trained like me, you're very familiar with bel canto singing. It's called bel canto singing. This is the norm for most Western classical music. This is an emphasis on head voice. This is tall vowels. This is diaphragmatic support. This is emphasizing blend among the choir above all things. And generally, bel canto singing is going to emphasize a legato line or connected line. Pretty much everything else, folk, pop, jazz of other cultures as well, emphasizes a chest or a mixed tone. It's going to ask for a slightly brighter vowel, still going to ask for that diaphragmatic support, right? Because that is where all the power comes from. If you're not supporting from your diaphragm, you're not doing a healthy belt, and it's going to lead to problems down the road. But this kind of singing emphasizes, rather than blend, sort of vocal color. So the idea that each individual voice is going to bring its own identity or fingerprint to the group sound, and then the group as a whole is going to blend in the ear of the listener. And then rather than a legato line, there's texture within the articulation. So whether that's like short staccato bursts, whether that's accents, finding a big decrescendo or a big crescendo, those sorts of things are more idiomatic to this other style of singing rather than bel canto singing. And that's not to say that the two don't exist in each other. They certainly do. But this is just sort of basic sort of boilerplate definitions of these styles. Now, when you're thinking like, oh gosh, I would really love to sing this kind of rep, but I don't know if this is going to be possible for my singers. Hopefully, as we talk more about this, you'll find lots of different ideas for your ensembles. But I would strongly recommend that when you choose repertoire, you should program for your singers. Think about the singers you have, and then think about the singers you want to have 2 months from now. And find repertoire that's going to help you get from where you are now to where you want to be 2 months from now. And there's a number of different ways to do this. Programming for your singers, you can ask your singers to suggest repertoire or styles or languages from their cultures, which will mean that you have experts in your room who are well versed in that piece, language, style of music, and then you can share ownership of the piece with them, showing that you trust them, have them teach their peers. Think about the level of difficulty that your singers are able to achieve, or is aspirational for them in terms of their achievement. Think about how difficult the language will be for them to learn if, if you've got a group that is just learning solfege, maybe we're not going to give them, the Spanish piece right now, unless they're a bunch of native Spanish speakers in your choir. Think about musical concepts or skills that you want to emphasize. Maybe you've been working a lot on legato and you want to have a marcato piece. So you're going to look for something that's got a marcato line or a marcato section. And then also think about voicing. So how many parts can your singers reasonably handle? And then this is kind of the most important thing for me, is like, I ask myself when I'm thinking about repertoire, do I want to listen to this for, 12 weeks in a row, or however many weeks I have before my next concert? And if the answer is no, then your singers don't either. And you can just put it to the side. If you are excited about the rep, your singers will be excited about the rep, especially if you can communicate to them why you are so excited about the rep. And then finally, just remember that you have many, many experts in your room. Just because they're not experts at, Italian words for loud and soft right now doesn't mean that they don't have a ton of other musical knowledge and skill that they bring into your classroom every day. So use the experts that you have in your room, your students. Okay, let's pick some rep. So let's start with our beginning choirs. For beginning choirs, this is, I'm going to say, the very lowest, like youngest elementary age, maybe up through third or fourth grade, depending on how established your music program at your school is. Look for singable melodies. That's the first thing. If it's catchy to you, it's going to be catchy to them, and they're going to love singing it, and they're probably going to leave your rehearsal singing, which is one of your goals. So look for a melody that's really singable, beautiful, easy to sing, idiomatic for the voice. Look for easy structures. So the whole piece as a whole, a verse chorus or a partner song. A partner song is a really great way to also introduce two-part singing, but you don't need to at the very beginning. You can have them sing one melody and then have them sing the B melody, and then maybe an instrument plays one of the melodies while they all sing in unison. Think about different ways to mix and match if you've got a choir who's really starting to get established. I look for a unison or maybe a two-part texture, depending on my kids and how long I've had them for when I've got a littles. And then you also want to find what I call the Goldilocks range of voice. So for example, you don't want to go much below, I would say, middle C. Maybe they can touch down a little bit lower than that, but young voices really don't like to sit in the basement. Even though when they have trouble matching pitch, that's where they tend to go, is really low. It's not a healthy place for them to hang out. So you want to sort of keep them middle C or maybe just slightly below touching down, but like really there. And then I would say the C an octave above. The face C on the staff, maybe again touching just above that, but not too much. That's that like sweet little middle spot where all of your little voices are going to really shine and no one's going to be stretching or like, scraping down in the basement. A great piece that I love for my kids is called Child of Peace by David Wagoner. It's the first page of it is here. It's really beautiful. It's a two-part song, but the second part is very minimal. It's a lot of different words for peace in other languages, so it's a great opportunity to tie in some like history, world geography, all of that sort of thing, world cultures. But it's not appropriative in that way. You're just saying the word peace in other languages. You're not trying to imitate a style or a culture or anything like that. It's a really beautiful piece and easy to excerpt, like the harmony part. You could just have them sing the melody, or you could, I don't know, have your older choir sing one of the parts and your littles sing one of the parts. There's lots of ways to make this fit your ensemble. Other folks that I recommend, Mary Getzi is like a mainstay of this kind of music. Rollo Dilworth has some great stuff too. Partner song, one of his partner songs is called Shine on Me, and that's like my go-to that I pull for my littles who are beginning. It's an immediate hook. They love it. It's easy to sing, and it's got some challenging stuff in there too. And then canons are really great as well. You can start with simple canons that they'll already know, row, row, row your boat, etc., and then build from there. Another great idea for this age of choir that I actually just encountered from one of my colleagues up in Wisconsin is to have your choir sing just the soprano line, say, of some Renaissance polyphony. So if you've got a parish that's a little bit more traditional in their repertoire leanings, find a piece of polyphony like Talus's If Ye Love Me and have your singers just sing the soprano line and then have an organ or other instruments play the other parts. It's a really, really great way to give them some sort of like heavy, big boy, big girl repertoire without having them having to sing multiple parts. So that's beginning choir. For continuing choir, I look for interesting themes and texts. This is a middle school age choir, 4th, 5th grade, up through maybe 7th or 8th. These kids think deeply about the world. They have questions. They're starting to interrogate truths that they learned earlier. And so if there's a piece that will sort of like spark some conversation, we look for that. I look for this age for polyphonic textures, and the reason is it is easier to hear a complex harmony when it is your own individual line doing something rather than your line in thirds with somebody else's line. Even though a homophonic texture will look simpler to teach and do because the rhythms are the same, it's actually, I find, more challenging for this age group to sing in a homophonic texture that moves all at the same time rather than a polyphonic texture. So looking for lines that do their own individual interesting things. And then speaking of harmonies, you want to make sure that your harmonies are achievable. So not too crunchy, not too funky. We can have some suspension and release, and that's a great way to teach about dissonance and consonance. But I think avoiding something that's too weird, because although these kids have questions about the world and they're starting to interrogate truths, melodic consonance is apparently not one of them. They really will turn right off if I give them something too weird. So that's something that I look for. And then longer phrases. This age group wants to breathe all the time because they could when they were little, and you want to kind of discourage that and start encouraging stagger breathing at this age level. So finding longer phrases that will force them to learn how to stagger breathe is one of my like tricks. And then introducing non-English languages at this age level will have them complain at the beginning of the year, and by the end they will be bragging to their friends that they sang in Latin, Swahili, French, whatever it is. A beautiful piece that I highly recommend is by my friend and colleague Philip Regal. It's called A Grain of Sand. It's a beautiful text about how even if a tiny grain of sand is important to God, then how much more are we important, and that we cannot be alone. If a grain of sand is one of many on the beach, then we will not live or die alone either. I think it's so gorgeous. It is one of those pieces that like sounds harder and more substantial than it is. It's very easy to teach, but it sounds really impressive. There's one place where it splits into 3 voices, but it's only for a measure at a time. So you can drop the lowest voice or drop the highest voice or whatever you want to do, have other singers from another ensemble come in and sing one of them. You do you. But I highly recommend it. It's really beautiful. Another piece that this age group really tends to love is Da Pacem Domine by Franck. Mary Getzi has an arrangement of it that I think is very accessible, but you can also just use the original. That's fine. It's a canon in 4 parts, but it's a 2-part canon. So you've got a soprano and an alto line, and then another soprano and an alto line that go as part of the canon. And that can be a great way to introduce 4-part textures to this age group as well. Now let's talk about our advanced singers. So these are singers who are really ready for an additional challenge, but are still learning some basics, some fundamentals, and finessing mostly their dynamics and their expressiveness. So in an advanced piece, I will look for varied textures. That is a piece that starts one way and then has a section that's different in texture somehow. We start legato, we go to a more marcato section, or we start in unison and we blossom open into multiple parts. That kind of change can make keep your choir on your toes and make them feel very excited about what they're doing. I look for a hook. That can be anything. It can be the text. It can be the composer's life story. It can be the chorus that's really beautiful. Something that's going to get them excited and interested in the piece right away. I also look for challenging articulation or dynamics, something that is going to really challenge them in terms of executing these things. And then finally, finding music that excites me. If I'm stoked about singing it, again, they will be too. And that's all part of that trust of like, yes, I've chosen this piece for you because, and they're like, yep, I'm on board, I'm with you. My choir loved doing Rollo Dilworth's Freedom Train, which is here. You'll see it's got some like tenor bass divisi as well as some 3-part soprano alto divisi. So if you've got more trebles in your choir than changed voices, this is a really easy way to like make use of them and let them show off. It can also lend itself to movement really well. And then there's a shout chorus at the end where we've got 4 parts stacked on top of each other, but every part is doing its own like little train theme. It's a beautiful piece, super energetic and really awesome. Other pieces that I recommend at this age level are City Called Heaven by Josephine Polanitz. So gorgeous, especially if you've got a really knockout soloist, a voice that's just really awesome, or somebody in your congregation who's a really great singer and you can put them in on the solo on this. The choral parts are not difficult and there's so much you can do with that. And then the soloist really gets to show off over the top. And then my choir just this past spring really loved the challenge of Cantique de Jean Racine by Fauré. There's an SATB version, obviously that's the original, but there's also a challenging SSA Divisi arrangement of it. Both are phenomenal, very authentic. The SSA version is very authentic to the original. Learning the French is a challenge, but something that an advanced choir will be excited about. And then finally, we've got our changing voices. Oof, okay. Changing voices, they want so badly to sound good. They want so badly to sound good. And the goalpost moves for them on a daily, sometimes hourly basis. So when I'm programming for changing voices, especially if you've got a cambiata choir that's like just tenors and basses who are just sort of figuring out where they're going to land, look for flexible or narrow ranges and opportunities to move singers easily as you need to. So for this group, I think it's just as much about choosing great repertoire as it is choosing repertoire that you can teach all parts to all singers. Have everybody work on everybody else's line so that if, you know, Timmy is a beautiful boy soprano one day and then comes in the next day sounding like just the bassiest bass, you can just scoot him on over and he doesn't feel out of his league. Salmo 150 by Hernani Aguiar is a great example of this. You can see here, it's a lot of ostinatos going on. And then really the soprano line is the most challenging thing, but I've also done this in like everybody in the same, everybody reading the same sort of narrow range. So like the soprano line, maybe it's you give it to your tenors just an octave down or something like that, or you give it to your altos an octave down. Be flexible with your repertoire. Don't dumb down the rep. Don't choose something that's like easy and babyish for them because they'll tune right off of that. Rather, you can adjust your octaves, your keys, your registration. You can have boys come in and then stop singing on a couple of notes and then come back in. Or you can have them drop down the octave for that little section and then come back up. Whatever your singers need is fine with changing voices because whatever the reality is for one week is not going to be the same the next week. And as long as they're not pushing outside of the bounds of what feels good for them, then they're going to be fine and come out the change on the other side just fine. So no matter what you program, it's super important that you do your homework, that you know ahead of the first rehearsal what the piece is about, a little bit about the composer, about the composition, time period, about the text, some little tidbit of information that you can share with your choir and get them excited about it. Leave room for discovery. If you think you have everything mapped out before you get started and you know exactly what it's going to sound like, no, you don't. It's great to be in a sandbox sort of mindset with your choirs to let them inform the process as well. And don't be afraid to try new things. You know, I know we all love to program what we know. I certainly am guilty of this as well, but I try to bring in new things for myself because again, that goes back to the like, I don't want to listen to the same song for 3 years in a row. Let's try something new. Finally, we're going to talk about the way that a good choral rehearsal should feel. And this is the balance between trust and creativity, how trust feeds into creativity. So trust feels like the truth that all voices are equally valuable. Your singers are going to immediately identify who are the better musicians and who are not. Your job is to identify who is a less strong musician and find something to praise about them so that others see value in their contributions as well. Choir is choir. It's not soloists. It's not the star of the show. We are all making music together. We are only as strong as our weakest link. And if you can create a culture of identifying everyone's strengths, that's really going to help your program grow and feel like a place where trust is just a given. Similarly, along those lines, collaboration over hierarchy. This is not to say that I don't have leaders in my ensemble. I do. I have section leaders who I give responsibilities to, but those responsibilities are things like, hey, can you go run a sectional out in the hall? Can you take your section through this part of the piece while I work with the altos on this? Having your singers elect their own leaders from within their ensemble. And we like to say why we are nominating someone for a leadership position. So I'll have the singers raise their hand. I know I'm gonna nominate Jan because she blah, 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 blah. And that not only gives you an understanding of what the strengths are within your ensemble, but also gives that kid a boost. A lot of the times people get nominated who weren't expecting to be nominated, and that can feel so great to know that your ensemble mates trust you, and that you were, considered for this leadership position, whether or not you get it. So finding those opportunities to give responsibility back to your singers will really help to build the communal trust. And then from there, we build creativity. Leave room for experimentation and rehearsal. This can look like creative movement if you're familiar with the Eurythmics school of thought. I really love Eurythmics, especially for young singers, getting into their bodies and not having feel like their brain is just up here and their body is something completely different. Middle schoolers are like, what's happening? So if you can get them to connect again, through Eurythmics, through stepping out the rhythm, through conducting themselves. Like if you were a conductor, how would you show this phrase? And then they all do some sort of swoopy stuff with their arm, and then you can scope out who might be a good candidate to lead warm-ups next week, and it's a win-win for everybody. Think about incorporating composition or improvisation into your rehearsals, especially if you're singing a piece that is from a style that uses that kind of technique. Maybe you've got somebody improv over a shout chorus in a gospel piece. Maybe you have people ooh on the chords of a piece and then have somebody compose a new melody over the top. Whatever it is, this is another back pocket activity, or maybe a shake it up activity that you can incorporate just to get them thinking in new ways. I like to use, especially when we're close to concert and everybody's bored of the rep, follow me. So I will show something completely different from what we have rehearsed in terms of a dynamic or a cutoff or something like that. And they really love to do that kind of thing because it challenges them to stay on their toes. And for you, it keeps them focused on you and trained to focus on you in the performance as well. And then finally, just thinking about music as a sandbox, not a blueprint. So music is play. Music is, let's build this. Okay, that's not working. Let's do away with that. Let's try something else. When you get a score, it's not, we have to build the building exactly this way. It's much more of a sandbox, and you can do your own things with this. Thank you so much. I know I speak really fast, and I appreciate all of your focus and attention. I hope this has been helpful, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I have, there's a question. Hey, Rudy, can I just jump into this question from the...
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. What about choir members who can't match pitches and or sing in tune? Yeah, they exist, and they are excited to be here, man. I have a couple of different approaches to this. I sandwich those singers. I'm gonna just call out a specific student because, man, I had this little boy in one of my Chicago Public Schools choirs, the sweetest kid, loved to sing, could not match pitch if it came up to him and smooched him on the nose, just couldn't do it. So what I did was I sandwiched him between two really strong singers. And I warned the singers ahead of time. I said, hey guys, I'm gonna put you here on either side of Hans. I need you guys to just help to guide him in a way that is loving and accepting and doesn't let him know that that's what you're doing. I'm putting you here because you're strong singers and you know your part. He's gonna need a little bit help following. Can you do that? They will be flattered to be asked, and you will have tunnel hearing for that kid who struggles to match pitch. I also, usually when a kid struggles to match pitch, it's because they can't hear their voice within the ensemble well. And so doing some sirens or some, if you have a whiteboard and you draw a wiggly line on the whiteboard, and say, okay, this is the contour of sound that I want you to follow in a warm-up. Follow this contour, and it goes up and your singers go up, and it comes down and your singers go down. Having that singer sort of explore what different pitches feel like in their voice is helpful for them to understand oh, it feels like this when I'm singing too low. And so I'm going to just sort of bring myself up there. Another thing that I have not seen work personally, but I've heard other colleagues talk about this is, again, related to eurythmics, which is a school of thought that really connects movement and singing, is to take a pitch crank and have that singer turn the pitch up on their own voice. So if they're starting down here and you're like, oh, that's a little bit under, can you crank it up? And then let them know when they've reached it. That can also be effective. So yeah, I would say with young singers, it's just a matter of finding, and actually with older singers too, because my dad loves to sing, but sometimes wanders in the pitch department, and it's just a matter of training and finding their voice. And I would say if you're able to do one-on-one little short sessions, 15 minutes with a kid like that, or recommend them a voice teacher, it's really helpful to have a one-on-one session with a kid who struggles to match pitch, or an adult. Anything else? Cool. Rudy, I don't see anything else here. Do you have anything else on your end?
I have no other questions. But we certainly have time, I think, to take any if they're out there. Here we go.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, hi, Susan. Energy at the end of the year. Yes, I assume, well, maybe I shouldn't assume. Yes, being recorded. Yes, it is. In terms of energy at the end of the year, I think there are a number of different things that you can do. I always do a sort of an awards type of ceremony, and this can be paper plate awards. Kids love that. I do awards at the end of the year. We do like community performances at the end of the year. So I just took my middle schoolers on a little like weekend excursion, but you could easily do this within your own school day, like walking around to other classrooms and doing a little mini performance for other kids. We went to a memory care facility in Chicago and sang for the residents there. It was great for my kids because they got another opportunity to practice their concert repertoire, but also they got an opportunity to see firsthand that like this is really helpful for other people. I think giving students leadership opportunities at the end of the year as well is another great way to keep them hooked. I think just all of those sorts of like, let's shake it up, let's try something new, especially if you're still preparing for a performance of some kind and you need them to stay focused on the repertoire. If you don't, show them videos of other choirs, discuss other choirs' techniques, what they're hearing, stuff like that can be really, really great. James, you're asking about classroom management tips. Oof, okay. I could do a whole webinar on just this. I have worked in a number of different settings, some with really, really well-behaved kids just off the bat. Others where I had kids like slamming doors in my face and swearing at each other and like the whole thing. So I would say consistency is like the number one thing. Having a dedicated way that you get their attention that's not shouting. Keeping your voice and demeanor calm is super important. I do shh, 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 shh to get people's attention. I like to do that because if they're shushing, they can't be talking back. Clapping, 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, all that sort of stuff also works. Let me think, what other classroom management tips do I have? I think honestly, especially if you've got a program that like has seen a lot of turnover or upheaval, or if you're new in the room, it's proving to your kids that you are there and that you're there for the long haul and that you're going to stick around, because they're probably testing you. Set your expectations and then quietly and firmly demand that they meet them. And I have a toddler, so this piece of advice comes from a toddler mom. If you are dysregulated in your own self, if you're discombobulated, if you're angry, if you're, emotionally upset, there's no way that you can get your kids to not be that way too. So you as the teacher need to stay regulated, even if the whole rest of the world is going all to pieces. Yeah. All right, let me just, how do I adjust rehearsal plan for a school period if I only have 40 minutes? Oh, yeah. Okay. So I would say, Vanessa, if I had just a short amount of time, I would I would build in repertoire learning into the warm up. So I would do some like call and response and then work on tall tone for that. Or I would try and um, give as much repertoire like information in the warm up as possible. I also sometimes do an abbreviated warm up version, but I do think that like having 7 minutes of warm up is really valuable because it teaches other skills that you're going to need later. So yeah, I think building in your repertoire into the warm up is probably the most efficient way to have your cake and eat it too. Of course, thank you. Thank you, Sarah. I'm glad you learned a lot. Yeah, James, that's genius. Letting them pick their favorite pieces. Yeah, that's great. I hope you all can see this. Otherwise, I'm just like saying strange words to myself.
Thank you, everyone. Just in case we can't see what it is, I'll go ahead and read those things, Carling, and then I'll go over the closing parts.
Great.
So Sarah said, I want to thank you for programming a speaker that actively teaches the grades and content they are speaking about. Great presentation and really learned a lot. James said, we have a choir party on last day of rehearsal, including awards, games, letting them pick their favorite pieces from the year to sing. Vanessa said, thank you. And Laurie actually has a question for you. So how do you manage students who want to quit and make them tell me themselves?
Nice. Good. Yes. Accountability. I love that. So the sad thing is kids these days, I sound so old. Kids nowadays are pickier about their activities and they sort of tend to dip in and out of stuff, I have found. I absolutely would love kids to tell me themselves if they're not going to continue in one of my ensembles, and I want them to tell me why. And then I let them. Especially if it's like, I just don't have time, I just blah, blah, blah. I find that allowing them to make that call for themselves with grace and with open arms so that they understand that the minute they want to come back, I'm going to love them doing that. And there's going to be no hard feelings. That's super important. And I have had kids take a gap year and then come back because they loved it and missed it so much. I just want my kids to never feel like they have to sacrifice, I don't know, their own mental health in order to make choir and softball and travel soccer or whatever else they're doing outside work. And if I'm going to be the quickest thing to drop, then that's what needs to happen. But I want them to understand that we will miss them and that the second they want to come back, that they're welcome to. Ugh. Sorry, Lori says, I've had some parents give me grief, so I was just checking. Don't let the parents give you grief. Everybody likes to think they can do their job better or your job better than you. Tisn't true.
All right, I think that is all the questions. Other than please send us a link to rewatch. You will receive a link tomorrow with the webinar that will be on demand, so you can rewatch as many times as you would like. And with that, I will say thank you for attending today's NCEA webinar. NCEA continuously strives to improve the quality of our services for our members based on feedback. We will use your input to inform future work and improve services. The survey that I dropped in the chat should take about 5 minutes to complete. If you are interested in a certificate of attendance, please include your email address and name at the end of the survey. Since the certificate will be sent via automated email, please check your spam folder if you do not see the email within a few minutes. And thank you again, Carling and Rudy, and everyone have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you so much.